Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today, welcome to this particular video on data structures and algorithms topic. So after practicing so many DSA problems, and even if you practice various problems on different coding platform, a very important point to remember or to actually to understand is to identify which problem solving technique to use or which algorithm to go with while solving data structures and algorithm problems, because see, the problems are very diverse, and it's of course it's very important to understand which logic to use and approaches, and there are varied approaches to all the problems. So you need some kind of clues, and even if you are practicing so many, you must have actually been able to identify for yourself that which data structure algorithm should be most applicable to a particular problem. So this will actually make your time for the thinking and coming up with the optimal approach very easy. So let's get into this topic. This is a short video, and I hope which will be really very helpful to you all, especially when you're stuck in any problem and you're not able to crack the logic in the problem, the logic, or to identify the pattern behind a data structure problem. So watching this video will actually give you the insight into that. So the first and foremost, as I've told you in my previous coding videos also, that before solving any particular problem, you need to read the coding problem question and break down the question into small parts so that you understand and would be able to crack the logic. So the first approach definitely to anyone's mind which comes is the brute force technique. So what is this brute force technique? Brute force technique is nothing but this, just it involves solving a problem by trying out all the possible solutions. So when you are actually dry running the test cases, or even you're just doing by trial and error, or trying to come up with the logic, the first logic which it's very hard to actually crack the optimized logic in one go. So when you have just thought of not an optimal approach but a naive approach, which takes, even though it takes a high time complexity, lot of time and space complexity, but the solution does work and is a solution to the problem, then that is called as a brute force approach, and that is one of the approaches you could use for solving coding problems. Start with the brute force or the the naive approach if you're not able to actually in one go come to the optimized approach. So it is often simplifies the simplest approach, by the way, and some of the examples would be in some problems like linear search, where you want to find a particular element in a array, or say in any collection of elements. So linear search or traveling salesman problem, even knapsack problem. So of course linear search can be solved with other approaches as well, which are optimized. Even TSP, which is traveling salesman problem, knapsack problem can be solved using dynamic programming, which is an optimal approach, but these can be done initially with the brute force approach. I hope I have made this clear to you. An example of using brute force technique is when you encounter order of n square time complexity, and when you are actually using various nested for loops to in some way to crack the logic behind the problem. That is where brute force comes handy. Then of course, it's in interviews you have to go with some optimal approach. So moving on, after the brute force you have to crack some logic, and some of the techniques over here would actually help you to actually identify which pattern to come across and to use in any data structure algorithm problem. So binary search is the next technique. So binary search is basically, just remember that whenever you're given a sorted array or a sorted search space, then the first thing that comes into your mind is binary search. So that is like something I would a tip I would give to you. So the pattern is based on divide and conquer strategy. This is again I would cover over here next point itself. This again, divide and conquer is another strategical approach and is used for efficiently searching or finding an element in a sorted data structure. There are various problems you will find on LeetCode, HackerRank, or various other platforms of coding that will use binary search technique. So it basically divides the search space repeatedly in half until the target element is found or deemed not present. So when you have a search space, the main aim over here in binary search is to use the dynamic, so that divide and conquer approach. Using the divide and conquer approach, you're going to divide your search space into halves, and you're going to eliminate that half space which does not contain any element in the search space, but the half of the search space which will contain any element is going to be the one which you are going to further prune, or you're going to further divide, right, using the divide and conquer technique. So that is binary search, and some examples for binary search are median. These are some very common questions that you can take a look and practice. So median of two sorted arrays, search insert position. So wherever there is a searching involved, and especially when you are given a sorted search space, you can go with binary search technique. Search in a rotated sorted array. Of course, there are problems that the array is not sorted. So in those cases also you can apply binary search, but remember to first sort the array. And it also depends on the problem itself. So whenever you're given a sorted space or a sorted array, then go with binary search technique. The next problem solving technique or algorithm you can go with is divide and conquer. So what is divide and conquer? It is a pattern, DSA pattern, which involves breaking down a problem into smaller sub problems. So whenever you have the problem of overlapping sub problems, see, a problem is there and there are overlapping sub problems, there is where you use divide and conquer approach. So you combine the results. Basically, you're dividing a big problem into small chunks of problems and then recursively combine the results of those smaller problems to get a final problem, right? To get the results to obtain the final solution. It is used for problems that exhibit overlapping subproblems, and it can be used efficiently solved by dividing them into smaller independent parts. So some examples of divide and conquer are median of two sorted arrays, merge case sorted lists, maximum subarray. These are some coding problems you can practice for understanding divide and conquer approach. Coming to the next approach, which is two-pointer technique. Now, what is this two-pointer technique in data structures? Two-pointer in this is very, very common and very easy method, I would say, for two-pointers, because widely used not only in arrays but also in linked list data structures. So if you've heard of the tortoise and the hare problem, okay, the hare total problem. So over there you see that there is something called as a fast pointer and the slow pointer. So if you practice such problems where some examples are finding a loop in a linked list or detecting a cycle in a linked list. So in those kind of problems, this fast and slow pointer comes very handy, because the fast pointer is the pointer which moves 2 steps ahead of the slow pointer, and the slow pointer just moves, suppose it moves 1 step, the fast pointer will move 2 steps, double of the first step. So by the time the fast pointer reaches the end of the linked list, you will see that the slow pointer just moves to the middle of the linked list. So in that way you will get to know what is the midpoint, or if you observe that there is a cycle detected in the linked list or not. So for such scenarios, two pointer approach is the most recommended approach, I would say. So not only in linked list but even in arrays you have two pointers. So when I was explaining the previous problem, the example was container with the most water. So there itself I have used two pointers, right? The left pointer and the right pointer, basically moving the two pointers. So when you are having such kind of problems in array or a linked list, and even if an array is sorted or not, so when we are actually moving the two pointers, the left pointer will move forward and the right pointer will move backward depending on some condition. In order to satisfy the condition, you're moving such pointers, the I and the J pointer, or the left and the right pointer. So two pointers are used to traverse the data structure simultaneously. Remember, the two pointers are moving simultaneously, often from different starting points and at different speeds. So it's useful for solving problems that involve searching, comparing, or manipulating elements in an array or linked list. So whenever you want to compare the two elements, the element values in the two linked lists or a data structure, then go ahead with the two pointers approach. And some examples, as I've already mentioned: container with most water, three sum, two sum, cycle, and linked list detection. Go ahead and solve these to actually understand what is the two pointer approach. Now, what is DFS and BFS? Even this I have covered in the previous videos of binary search tree, where I explained you some, I gave you some glimpse about what is DFS, BFS, the difference between them, and which data structure is used, right? So DFS, remember, it stands for depth first search technique, and it is different from BFS, which is breadth first search technique. So DFS uses the stack data structure, and which follows now stack data structures, and it's a linear data structure, whereas graphs, which actually use DFN and BFS, they are non-linear data structures, right? But no, so I'm assuming you know the linear and non-linear data structures, which I had also covered in my previous video. So linear data structures, you have arrays, queues, stacks, linked lists, and the non-linear data structures, you have trees, binary tree, binary search tree, the different types of trees like AVL tree, any tree, graphs, tables, and sets. So they are non-linear data structures. So when you talk about BFS, DFS, so DFS uses stacks, which follows the last in first out approach, which is the element which is inserted at the the last element which is inserted comes out the first, and the element which is inserted the first comes out at the end. And in BFS, you employ you employ the queue data structure, and the queue is actually using going with the FIFO technique, which is first in first out. So DFS, it is recursive, both are recursive in nature. Recursion is again, in a data structure question, you have something called as the iteration approach and the recursion approach. So recursion is where you are calling the function again. A function calling itself another, in itself is called a recursive function. So it's a recursive traversal technique. A repetition is involved that explores as far as possible. Now, when I said as far as possible, it is depth wise. That is, the name says depth first search. So you're actually moving from the top of the tree to the bottom, right, of the subtree. So along each branch before backtracking. So there is backtracking involved. Backtracking is another approach in data structures you must be familiar with. So DFS, it employs backtracking as well, but before backtracking, it has to actually explore each and every nodes which are present in that particular the subtree. It has to first cover the subtree from the top, which is root, to the end, the end, which is a leaf node of the particular branch of the subtree. So once it has along each branch, it has explored, then the backtracking is done, and it is often used to explore all possible paths or search through tree or graph data structures. So that is why you can use DFS. And of course, graph data structure is, as the name says, and even the problems are little dicey. You need a lot of practice in graphs, but I would say for solving graph data structures, the most important problems that I would recommend you to solve is first DFS and DFS. Most of them can be done using breadth first search or depth first search, depending on the context. Examples of DFS where you can use a binary tree in order traversal. In order traversal, as I've explained you, it is in the ascending order, you could say, of the nodes, or it is nothing but the leftmost node, right? Left root node and then the right node. That is the order. Maximum water island. Now, this is where, you are given a tree, or you are given some combination of elements, and you have to find the island, basically, which is nothing but the group of elements or the nodes which is surrounded by the most water. So the one, or it can, even I can give you a matrix. So if you see, there are many questions on code as well, they give you a matrix kind of data structure, and they actually ask you to find the maximum water island, which is the island. So water over there is nothing but they're nothing but the elements which are present in the matrix, so which surround the matrix, and they have to satisfy. So the one which is containing the most water, it has to be returned, and for that you can use the DFS technique, which is again recursive in nature. You can take a look into that problem as well. N queens problem is again a DFS problem. It says it uses backtracking approach over there as well. So N queens is nothing but you have to place the queens in such a way that they are non-attacking positions. Then coming to BFS technique, which is breadth first search. So it explores all vertices or elements at the same level. Now, this is level wise. That's the difference I've already explained in the previous video. So depth first search is when you're going depth wise, and breadth first search is you're moving level wise. So level wise, moving before moving to the next level. It commonly used to find the shortest path or explore neighbors in a graph or a tree. Example includes symmetric tree, level or a traversal of binary search tree, and so on. Coming to the next approach, which is DP, which is very, very important for any kind of interviews you face, or even in data structures and algorithms. Dynamic programming is one important data structure technique and algorithm. So when I said what is dynamic programming, it is a pattern which involves breaking down a problem into smaller sub-problems and solving them independently. You would see various problems of dynamic programming. There are basically two approaches in dynamic programming problem. Then that is memoization or caching approach. That is memoization and tabulation. These two techniques are something that you have to practice. So what is this DP all about? It involves caching, which is nothing but memoization, right? Memoization is for reducing the space, optimizing the space, or nothing but caching. To make the operation faster as well. Not only the space, but the time also gets reduced. So optimizing the time and the space complexity to avoid redundant computations and improve efficiency. So you need not actually call the function again and again. You're reusing the function, right? And by avoiding the redundant computations. So that is called as the dynamic approach, where you are breaking a problem into smaller sub-problems and solving them independently of each other. It is particularly useful for optimization and counting problems. Now, there are various DP problems you will be able to find. The most crucial patterns which you will make you to understand dynamic programming as a beginner, I would say first go with longest palindromic substring. Now, palindrome, as the name says, it is, something like a reverse, I would say, where you have a combination of numbers. So palindrome of a number is reverse of a number, or if it's something, even if it's a string, and you find the reverse of the string, that is a palindrome. So a string which can be not only the reverse, but read from the reverse is the same. So when you have something like Malayalam is a word. That is a palindrome example because Malayalam read from the front to back and back to front. Even if you reverse it, it is a palindrome. It is the same even if you reverse it. So that is a palindrome. So to find the longest palindromic substring, that is substring is a string is a combination of letters or characters. So you this is one example of dynamic programming. Coming to next, which is longest common subsequence. This is LCS problem. You can take a look into that. Longest increasing subsequence, then largest sum contiguous subarray. Now there is slight differences between subsequence and subarray. This is again you have to look into because when you are solving this problem that comes handy. Then coming to next, which is cadence algorithm. Cadence algorithm is nothing but largest sum contiguous subarray. That is the cadence algorithm you can solve using the dynamic programming. So that was all about dynamic programming approach, and this is very important again. Now coming to next, which is sliding window. Again, very easy technique and something which you should come to your mind when you are seeing problems like the one which involved maintaining a subset of elements. So as I told, sliding window, it's like a subset or a sublist of elements to be identified within a window, because a window has some specific or a fixed size as it slides through the data structure. It's commonly used for problems that require finding subarrays satisfying specific conditions. Some examples of sliding window are longest substring without repeating characters, minimum window substring, maximum wall subarrays of size k, and so on. So that is where you're finding some, even if you're finding the minimum window substring, you're actually finding a substring basically which is of a window of fixed size. So you're finding a window of the fixed size which is also sliding through the data structure. So that is why it's called a sliding window. There also it does employ, when you're using sliding window solving problems like these, you will also see the two pointer approach being used simultaneously. Coming to the next, which is greedy approach. Now greedy approach, although it is recursive, but there is difference between DP and greedy approach. I would not say that DP is always optimized. Yes, in most of the cases DP is optimized, but greedy approach solves some problems, and some examples are container with most water, jump game, coin change sum problem on lead code. These are very famous. So they basically, as I've told, they make greedy approaches when you're making locally the most optimal solutions at each step to find an overall optimal solution. So it is useful for solving optimization problems again. So which makes the best choice at each step leads to an optimal solution. So at every local step, you're finding the local optima solution. Coming to next, which is backtracking. Now, backtracking involves trying out different possibilities, efficiently pruning paths. So, pruning is usually undoing changes. You're backtracking them, right? You're pruning the paths which are unlikely to lead the solution. That is why it comes very handy in recursive problems. Backtracking goes hand in hand with DFS as well, especially for the n queens problem where you need to employ the backtracking algorithm. So, letter combinations of phone numbers, Sudoku solver, and some examples you can practice for understanding backtracking, and they are mostly used for involving wherever you see some problems or related to finding permutation, combination, or exhaustive searches. So for permutation, combination, or some subsets to find, combinations to find of elements, you can go with the backtracking approach, which comes handy, recursion and backtracking. Then coming to the final and the last, which is the topological sort approach. Now this is basically related to the something called as DAG, which is directed acyclic graph. Now this is for ordering elements or tasks based on their dependency. So as the name says, topology, it's following some kind of an order. So topological sort is basically linear ordering. It's a sequential ordering only. But it is of a directed acyclic graph. Now this graph is directed in nature, and it is also not having any cycle inside it. So there is no cycle or loop connectivity in the graph. That is called as a directed acyclic graph. So a linear sequential ordering of that is called as a topological sort, especially when you're solving problem, which is very famous. Course schedule is something, a problem which I would recommend to to solve to understand what is topological sort. So this is basically to determine a valid sequence of tasks. So in course schedule also, it's asking you to check whether you can complete a set of courses or not, and that courses are dependent. Now that dependency is like you need to follow some ordering. So where there is a ordering involved, like one particular course has to be finished only when the previous one is done, or some kind of a dependency involved, then go with topological sorting. Longest increasing path in a matrix is another one which will help you to understand what is topological sorting. So these were some of the most important approaches, the patterns which will actually help you to identify which data structure algorithm to go with while you're solving various DSA problems. And this comes very handy when it becomes very too difficult for you to actually get or come to the logic or identify actually which pattern to go with, or which concept the pattern is taken from, and you have to start applying. So I hope I have given you insights on that, and please share with all your friends, subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay tuned. Thank you so much.